The BCN Divine Triangle. Black Christian nationalism seeks to change society in order to accomplish the liberation of black people, and realizes that we, as a people, are engaged in a struggle for power and for our very survival. We utilize the BCN Divine Triangle as a godly symbol to access and connect with the mystical powers that was in our ancestors and the cosmic energy and creative intelligence of the universe. We believe in the raging desire for freedom, born of the Holy Spirit. We believe in the healing powers of the revolutionary BCN group process, which begins the liberation of black people by erasing 400 years of behavior modification. We believe in the transforming power of positive righteousness, where we as a people take a stand for righteousness over evil. We pledge to let the power of the Divine Triangle work its wonders in us. We pledge to take the power of the Divine Triangle to African people across the world. May God and the Black nation be our witness.
It is very clear to me that there is no me without you. I am because you are. Amen.
Well,
I'd like to start off this morning kind of laying some foundation for our interpretation. If you can turn to the inside back page of your bulletin, and if someone could please read BCN Teaches number 8.
Properly interpreted, the Bible is a history of God's relationship with the African nation Israel and the Black Messiah, Jesus. Rather, without a correct BCN interpretation,
Amen.
the Bible has served to confuse and enslave a powerless black people who have waited in vain for deliverance here on the earth.
that's right.
And for transportation to a mythical heaven in the sky after death.
Well,
And I love it.
amen. Amen. Amen.
So we have to be very careful in reference to the Bible. Because without that BCN interpretation,
Well,
it can enslave, it does enslave the minds of African people.
oh yeah.
I'd like to also have you look to the other side where we have the key values. Obedience to God's will is essential for the fulfillment of the covenant promise.
Mm-hmm.
And it is especially important for those seeking to be effective leadership.
Well.
So we always want to start off with our interpretation of God. Because the way we see God is not the way most other people see God in the black church and in the society in general. We see God as cosmic energy. And that's the basics of scientific analysis, historical analysis, that there is no place empty of energy. The entire universe and everything from planets to insects is one form of energy. And energy cannot be destroyed. It was always here, You waste your time trying to figure out when it all got started. It was always here when we even became conscious of it. And it always will be here. And so as we go through this life experience and we transition back into the realm of the ancestors, that's an energy realm.
That's right.
Okay? So therefore we see as an intelligent community that this energy can be used for both positive and negative.
Well,
And even in the negative, if you see a forest fire and all the trees get burnt down, and people might say, well, that's real bad. That was destructive. But then let it rain, and almost instantly what happens? New shoots start coming up from the ground.
well,
And that is an experience of God, and we need to understand that and how God works. Because it's that creative intelligence that allows us to interpret the will of God. In other words, to interpret the energy field that's all around us. If you're walking through this world and have no connection and understanding to this energy that's all around us, you're going to be suffering all kinds of consequences for not being plugged in to the energy field.
well,
And so in
amen.
Black Christian nationalism, God is cosmic energy directed by creative intelligence.
Well,
Okay,
all
that's
right. Okay,
very
brother,
clear
all right.
on that. Individualism
Well,
is a reflection of a poor energy field.
Well,
It's a reflection of poor awareness of how energy works in the world. Because as one spark of energy, you're only focused on yourself.
right.
well,
When you understand how energy works, you know that there's a cosmic web and everything is connected.
That's correct.
And so when you isolate yourself from that connection,
That's right.
you are very vulnerable
Yes.
to anything that might happen. And you do not have the power to be able to affect the energy field.
well,
Okay, let's be clear on that. Individualism alienates people from the power of God, therefore, which we are dependent on for our existence.
well,
Okay, with that being said, we want to then go on and talk about the part 2 of our presentation on the book of Isaiah.
All right.
It is an opportunity for us to look at some of the historical lessons that our people have had in the past. But we also need to be clear about the writings of the Bible. That most of the writings of the Bible were written during periods of oppression and exploitation.
well,
All right.
So when we're talking about the Assyrian exploitation and oppression, that's very clear. We know that even at the beginning of the black nation Israel, that there were nations all around them. And it was a time of empire building, and almost every other day somebody was coming in trying to take what the black nation Israel had.
That's
well,
right.
And the basic concepts in the teachings of Isaiah is that when you stray away from the law,
Well,
and that is the values that have been passed down from your own people. In other words, there were generations that preceded you. Nothing is new under the sun.
well,
And all that time before we got to this period in terms of the black nation Israel, African people had developed value systems.
that's right.
And our understanding with how God works in the world. It comes out of a communal culture and awareness with nature, and we were passing those values down from one generation to the other. So that the next generation did not have to start from scratch.
There you go.
You could learn the lessons of the generation that preceded you and then move forward in the next generation.
well,
Where we have a problem is that when we forget, when we are separated from that knowledge of the past and we start anew, or when we are influenced by other people's cultures and their awareness of how God impacted them in the world,
That's right.
and we start running after their interpretation,
Right.
separating ourselves from ours,
Well.
then we had problems.
Amen.
And this is what was happening in the black nation Israel as they were experiencing this new awareness of self-control under the auspices of Egypt and other nations. They had an opportunity to put their own thing together.
right.
And the problem is, in the area in which they were, there were a lot of people coming into that area because, as last week we talked about, it was a part of the Fertile Crescent. It was a very fertile land. It was rich in natural resources, and it was also rich because it was a connection to trade from Africa all the way to the middle, all the way to China. So right there, all the trade coming out of Africa, the intellect, the resources passing through that particular area, going to other places in the world. So it provided a lot of affluency for the black nation Israel. And everybody wanted that. And so we were always under attack by other people, and that is the time period in which we are talking about.
All right.
We want to then look at a couple of scriptures before we kind of look at the historical analysis. And if you would look at your scripture insert, if I could get somebody to read both Isaiah 41:10 and then Isaiah 43:2. Someone read both of those. It's on that front page, 41:10 and 43:2.
So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand.
Amen. Go on. 43:2. Just
Okay. When you pass through the waters,
Okay.
I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. Flames will not set you ablaze. Hallelujah.
okay, that's very clear right here, is that what we're saying is that God is saying, I am with you. That's the covenant promise. As long as you follow the laws of our ancestors and the teachings that have come before you, that I will be with you in all your troubles. You don't even have to worry about that. The Spirit of God will be upon you. And then 43:2 is saying that does not mean there won't be some troubles in the world.
Well,
Okay, because humanity itself is an experience of different types of realities. And one of those realities is conflict and chaos, depending on what you accept in your life.
that's right.
But here again, God is saying that I will be with you through the difficult days. Okay, if you'll turn over onto the second side of the scriptures, and somebody read almost halfway down, Isaiah 54:17.
No weapon formed against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and this is their vindication from me, declares the Lord.
Amen.
Amen?
Amen.
Now this does not mean that there won't be weapons
That's right.
that will be used against you,
That will mean.
but they will not destroy you.
Amen.
Okay? Someone, Isaiah 58:1.
Shout it out loud. Do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the house of Jacob their sins.
Yes, indeed. And so we see what's happening to black people, but sometimes we won't say nothing.
That's right.
Some people will just
Go along.
Yeah.
and won't say anything to the brothers. And you can see brothers and sisters heading into trouble
Well,
and won't say anything. So when you're aware, you have the responsibility then to uplift your brother and to sister. And not to just be quiet about it, but to shout it out loud
well,
to let people see. Oftentimes, brothers and sisters will be talking outside of processes that their influence can bring about change.
Right.
We have processes here within the church where you can come to meetings
That's right.
and your voice can be heard.
Well.
But some would rather outside of the meeting, around the corner somewhere.
That's right.
You know, they this, that, and the other, and we ought to do this. when you can come to, it's an open council that you can sit on and let your voice be heard based on what God has brought into your awareness.
Well,
And it's that way we can have the process in that where your influence can affect change.
Say it again.
well, change.
Okay, and of course Isaiah 61:1. Please, someone.
The Spirit of the sovereign God is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted,
Well,
to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners.
So this is what Isaiah was saying to the black nation when everybody would ask him, well, why you got to have something to say about it? He said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and I have to say something about it. I see what's getting ready, I see what's happening, and I see the consequences of what's happening and how it will affect our people. And so I have to say something about it. And of course, when Jesus announced his ministry, this is where he went to the book of Isaiah and he read the same thing. So each one of us as black Christian nationalists, we say the same thing.
That's right.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me and I must speak out before
well,
the people.
amen, amen, amen.
Okay. All right, let me just kind of give some historical frame of reference in understanding the Bible, because as I said very early, is that most of what is written in the Bible was written during times of conflict, when the black nation Israel was exploited and oppressed by other nations. So we didn't always have full control of the process. And sometimes we had to do things because others were over us. And that's why Jesus spoke in parables. So that you would get the message, because at the same time the Romans were right over his shoulder all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Not only the Romans, but
Black
Negroes, okay, who was going to run and tell the master what was being said. Let me kind of bring some graphics to our presentation
Oh, okay.
and give us some historical background. This is the area that we're basically talking about for today's lesson, and it is called Mesopotamia, the main two rivers that flow down from these mountains into what's called the Persian Gulf, is the Tigris and the Euphrates. Let us be very clear that the first nations to develop in this area were African nations. That's right. We have to be very clear on that ourselves, because things have changed throughout time. So as far back as 3,500 BC, Ur, where Abraham is supposed to have come from, is a black nation. It's an area that's generally referred to in history as Sumeria or Sumer. And Sumer, the cultures and cities that developed in this area from the Persian Gulf all the way up to the north area up here. And this was also a very fertile district, and people were always trying to conquer this area as well. And things changed, as things do over time. Acadia, and this is why we have to kind of look at history from various perspectives. These are images carved in stone of what the people looked like in the area that was called Acadia. This would be the northern part of Sumeria. Now, if you look very closely, what do you see right here? That's an afro. That's an afro right there. There's no way you can mistake that as anything else. So that helps us to understand, if we didn't know already, that these are black people in this area. Although it has changed today, but back in 2197 BC, this area was dominated by who?
Black people.
By black people.
Amen.
The Chaldeans was in the southern area, and they provided stability for this whole area. Now, around 1900, as you saw there, about 2000 BC, you begin to have invasions coming out of this area right here. This is the very mountainous area, and as we talked about last week, on the other side, and in these mountains, you had what we would call today Caucasoid people, or white people. And it was at this time that there are major migrations. Earlier than that, a little trickle, by 2000 BC, there was major migrations as the Ice Age had retreated, and they were migrating into this area right here. So they would come into the northern area first. And so you would then have what we would call assimilation. And that assimilations of white folks coming into these cultures, cities and towns that they had never seen before. By 1700, still, Harambe is an African king in this particular area. You saw the artifacts right there.
Oh, yeah.
So even though whites were coming in, the basic foundation of the culture, in terms of the intelligentsia, the way the society was set up, the educational process was controlled by black people, and white folks were coming in trying to find a place of stability, a place where they could grow and develop their own families. And so, as a part of this invasion, other cities like Babylon would be created. But Babylon, up until 1900, was an African-controlled city. But here in the north, you can see the invasion coming in an area that is now called Assyria, and you got Syria right over here today. They are the descendants of the same people who were coming in here. So at this point, you had more and more white folks in this area, and they were learning from the cultures that were already set here by the Africans in Babylon, as well as the Canaanite Africans in the area called the Levant. And then most importantly, everybody was influenced by the Egyptians, who were African people as well.
Well,
as that Assyrian Empire began to grow, having learned basic organizational skills from the cultures that they were now a part of, they began to build their own nation. Their population began to expand, and you know how white folks are.
well,
Once they get their numbers, then they begin to want to what?
well,
Take over. Take over. So they began to situate themselves in places where they would have control, and eventually they would then take over this whole area right here, and then Babylon included. So some of their kings in this area, right? Folks. Get back over. Okay. Get back up just a little bit. So now they're controlling all of this area right here, all the way down, which includes Babylon and everything in between this area that was called Mesopotamia. And now they're beginning to move in this area to, their main objective is to get into Egypt, because Egypt is a main culture in this area at this time. And on the way to Egypt, you would have Judah. You would have Israel in the north and Judah here in the south. Right. So they were about to be conquered. News had already gotten out about what was going on in this area over here. And people would talk about it, but not being connected to this reality in terms of the energy of God. They didn't move on it.
well,
They just kept on doing what they were doing. And they had a good life, and they were partying, and based on their belief, they felt that, well, God gonna protect us no matter what we do. And some of us make the same error.
Well,
no matter what we do, God gonna take care of me. But that's not a part of the covenant agreement, right?
well,
Say, I'll be your God if what?
You
be my people.
If you be my people.
That's right.
And so by 700, one of the Assyrian kings came in and even actually conquered Israel, the northern kingdom, and then came on down and conquered Judah. Now, these Assyrians were some real mean people.
well,
And I'm going to just show you a little clip about them in a minute. But they would eventually control all of this particular area right here. All right, let's just kind of look historically at these Assyrians, because it helps us to understand the people that we were dealing with. Because we're still dealing with them today.
They conquered an empire from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. They despoiled the great city of Babylon and enslaved the tribes of Israel. Even the Pharaoh of Egypt paid them tribute. Their army became the largest yet seen, their warriors the greatest, and their warfare the cruelest.
Back that up a little bit. Because the Bible, having been taken over by other people, will give you a different interpretation.
Well,
These are the heads of the Hebrews of Judah that the Assyrians cut off.
My Lord.
So when we look at those heads, we can tell something about the culture of the people.
Yes.
What are we looking at right here? Yeah, okay. Some have braids, and some just regular African, hair. So you can tell when you carve this stone, this is not white people's hair that we're looking at right here. That lets you know right there, carved in stone, that these were black people.
In September of 655 BC, an Assyrian army sets off from its base in southern Iraq. Its target, Elam, a kingdom on the Persian Gulf. Boldly, the Elamites march from their city, cross the river that divides them from their foe, and prepare to do battle.
What do you say, brother?
The Edomites are African.
The Edomites were African people. And some people have that wrong today, but we'll show you the evidence carved in stone. As the Assyrians would take over Mesopotamia and Babylon.
Like a storm gathering, thousands of horses and men assemble. The signal for attack is sounded, and the chariots charge. By day's end, the river runs red with the blood of animals and men, the blood of Elamites. In their hour of victory, the Assyrians are proud and cruel. I cut their throats like lambs. I cut off their precious lives as orphans of stew. Like the many waters of a storm, amid the contents of their guts and their drills run wild. My prancing steeds plunged into the streams of blood and filth. With the bodies of their warriors, I filled the plain like grass. In 701 BC, the Assyrian king Sennacherib received troubling word from the province of Judah. Its king refused to pay tribute. Sennacherib was furious. He mobilized his army, tens of thousands strong.
The Judeans kept playing around with these Assyrians.
well,
They were looking for collaborations with other people outside of themselves that they hoped would protect them against the Assyrians. And when the Assyrian affront was right there in their face, this reminds me of how we're dealing with white folks today. When it was right there in their face, then they were like, okay, they're going to go along with the program. But when the Assyrians would retreat for a while and Judah had to pay tribute to them financially, then the people would try to develop another collaboration, maybe with the Egyptians. Why don't we get together and get these Assyrians off our back? And once the Assyrians heard about that, they became very angry about that.
Then swelled its ranks from states who owed him allegiance. Against such a foe, the Judean king Hezekiah dared not risk battle. he retreated within his capital, Jerusalem. All over Judah, his subjects fled to their own towns. Their narrow streets overshadowed by high walls up to 20 feet thick. To withstand the siege that would surely come, Hezekiah dug an underground channel to bring water into Jerusalem. Where the Assyrians could not send their army, they dispatched terror.
They would take the heads of people that they cut off and put them on
At Jerusalem,
what are those catapults, and catapult the dead heads into the city.
not to the king and his Jewish commanders in the language of diplomacy, but to the defenders of the battlements in their native Hebrew.
I am talking to the people on the wall, who will have to eat their excrement to drink their urine. Hezekiah cannot save you. And do not let him persuade you to rely on the Lord. The emperor of Assyria commands you to surrender.
He said, your king won't save you.
Well,
He said, I'm speaking to the people up there on the wall. You will be eating your what? Excrement and drinking your urine. Hezekiah won't save you, and your Lord won't save you as well. This is what the Assyrian is telling the black nation Israel as they prepare to besiege Jerusalem.
When finally the walls were breached, the Assyrians rushed in, shielded by Ishtar, goddess of war.
Thy face shall not turn green. Thy feet shall not tire. Thy strength shall not fail thee in heat and battle.
In other words, this is the Assyrians praying to what? Their God. See, other people got gods too.
oh yeah.
But the carnage was unspeakable. The ringleaders of the rebellion were impaled on stakes outside the city, their limp bodies a warning to other Judeans still holding out. In Judah as elsewhere, the Assyrians made sure the spirit of the conquered was indeed broken. They uprooted their subjects by the hundreds of thousands and carried them off into bondage in Assyria. The Bible records that in 721 BC, 30,000 inhabitants of Samaria were thus deported. The lost tribes of Israel.
As for Hezekiah, the Jew who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong cities, as well as the small cities in their neighborhood, which were without number, by leveling with battering rams, and by bringing up siege engines, I did take.
In the 50 years after the subjugation of Judah, Assyria pushed its borders to their farthest. In 675 BC, its warriors marched more than 1,000 miles and conquered Egypt.
So the conquest would then be complete, going through Israel in the north and Judah in the south, on their way to conquer Egypt. This was what was going on at the time that we speak of. The whole behavior of then taking the people from the city, what they wanted to make sure is that they would not leave behind a remnant that could rebuild. And so they would take not the poor people, but they would take the artists, they would take the aristocrats, and they would take them back to Assyria. This is another slave trade experience. Because we're talking about thousands of miles march from Judah all the way to Assyria.
Well.
And many died along the way. And those who made it there were treated as slaves by the Assyrians. Now this is before Greek and Roman and European slavery periods. This was already going on in the attack of the Assyrians. And so you see the dispersion of the black nation Israel even at that point right there. I have some glasses. Oh, okay. I have about 4 or 5 pairs. make sure I can see. So when we start talking about the history of the Bible, this is clearly a part of where things start to get real confused. Because the nation, for the most part, has been conquered. And the people have even been taken out and spread it out among other people. And then one of the things that the Assyrians would do is that they would take some of their own people and other people that they had conquered and bring them in to Judah. So that the population that was there would not be connected to the traditions and cultures of the original group of people. But the Bible says that God told them that this was a punishment for your evil ways, for you not following the law, for you not doing what you were supposed to be doing. In other words, not being conscious of what's going on around you. Some of us right now today, we see it on the news. We see Donald Trump and what the right-wing administration is trying to do. We see what is happening all around us. But many of us are not trying to do anything about it. Just hoping that it will go away. It's not going to go away, y'all. It's going to get worse. This is just the first 6 months. So this is what the black nation Israel was going through back in that day. These are the lessons of the historical reality of the black nation Israel that is written in the Bible and has been passed down to us. To understand what has happened in similar situations in the past. Hopefully that we will learn from that and then act accordingly today in the present. I told brothers and sisters who are trying to go out and demonstrate with white people against the ultra-right, I said, you're wasting your time. You're putting your life at risk. I said it in the history class the day before the white lady got ran over, and a bunch of black people got ran over too. She was killed. And I said that was a waste. And when you say, well, I want to go and protest and support, what's right, messing around with them white folks, have not we learned the lessons of the civil rights movement? We talk about the black nation Israel, but the civil rights was just around the corner there. You go down there messing with them white folks, our time would be better spent coming together, doing something for ourselves. So right after the conquest of the black nation Israel by these Assyrians, we had an opportunity to breathe for a minute in hopes that things would change for the nation. But we didn't change. And so another empire rose up called Babylon. Now this is a different Babylon from the one that we were talking about earlier. Okay, this Babylon is the result of the Assyrian conquest. Babylon now was a vessel of these Assyrians, and they controlled Babylon as well. And so the empire was very large by this point, and at this time, one of the leaders who was of Assyrian influence in Babylon decided that he wanted to build his own empire. And he would fight against his own people for control. Okay? And it was at this time that the Babylonian civilization, which is now that whole evil empire that you read about when they talk about Babylon, and all kinds of stuff was going on in Babylon. Well, we exist in Babylon today. And so at this time, his ego wanted to take over, and so he went up and then conquered the Assyrians at that time. But these were actually Assyrians conquering other Assyrians, is what this really was at this time. And had united with some other groups in order to be able to do that. And then moved on down here and conquered Judah again. As soon as you thought you was away from the oppression, like right now today in Africa, right? We're talking about white colonial oppression. But now we got who? Chinese. Because we haven't gotten our act together. And so when you're vulnerable like that, everybody see you as vulnerable. And now we're dealing with the Chinese influence. So Babylon came in, and then so we're running a little short on time, so let me kind of wrap this up. After Babylon, now you still had black people who were, just like we are, oppressed all within these empires that were controlled by the Assyrians and Babylonians. And one of these groups became a group that was called the Persians. And the Persians were a black nation as well. We need to understand that. Of course, by this time, we're talking about a mixed population, just like we got mixed population here in this country today. But a remnant among the black nations in that area rose up as the Persian Empire and then overthrew the Babylonians. And this was Cyrus the Great recorded in history. And so when Cyrus the Great, when we look at the images of Cyrus, and even when you look at the, how many of you seen the movie, the 300? Yeah. Okay, and when they look at the Persian, they had, at least they had the Persian leader as a black man. Unless you know that the Persians were black. But they were also, had a mixed population in there. And so when they took over, and Babylon, Cyrus the Great told the remnant that was left in Babylon that if you want to go back to Judah, you can go back to Judah. And as a matter of fact, I'll even give you some money. And I'll help you on your way there so you can go back and rebuild your nation. This is black folks talking to other black folks. Okay, and so as the Bible tells us, then those who were aware went back and began to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This is basically where the story ends at this point. At the point that the remnant, those who held on to the faith. Now, for a long time, those who had been in Babylon over 70 years they had produced new children. And these young folks who had grew up over that 7-year period, they never experienced the Holy Land. They didn't know nothing about Judah other than what the elders told them about Judah. Can you see the similarity? Not 70 years for us, but over 300 years. Not knowing who we were as a people. But holding on to what the elders would tell us about Mother Africa. And so they went back to Judah and began to try to rebuild. Now, in terms of the history, you know that soon after that there were other groups of people who came in. But while they were in Babylon, they were enslaved, and they were asked to sing the songs that held them together when they were in Judah. You know how the slave master had you singing and dancing. And they said, how can we sing the songs of Zion when we're oppressed in Babylon? It was that kind of relationship. They know they were oppressed and exploited in a foreign land. But how can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Let us remember the covenant promises, brothers and sisters. Let us understand this relationship that we have as a black people to the Bible. Because the Bible then at that point had been distorted. Most of what became a part of the Old Testament was written while we were in Babylon. The priests said, okay, now we're in a foreign land, but we still want to hold on to the culture and tradition of our people. And so they began to take the old scriptures, the scrolls that they brought with them and began to tell the story of their culture in the past, in order to keep the people connected to their own history and to their own culture. And it is these writings that would become a part of what we would call the Old Testament writings, which is the foundations of the black nation Israel. And we understand very clearly that that foundation came out of the spiritual reality of inner Africa, of the ancient Egyptian and Kemetic culture.
Well,
sometimes the Bible would represent Egypt as the bad guy, but that's because during other time periods people rewrote and put themselves in and changed the whole dynamics of the Bible. Some of this was in the time of Babylon, but after Babylon, then you have the Persian influence, and after that you got the Greek influence, and then the Roman influence, and so you can see how things have been distorted from that day all the way up to this day. And now new Bibles are coming out every day where white folks are telling the story from their own version. You got the King James version. You got the New Standard Revised version. And so other people are trying to tell our story. So the Bible has been used to oppress and exploit our people. And as what we said earlier, without a BCN interpretation, the Bible will not serve us. Thank you very much.
It's all right. We're gonna say, you know what I say, church? I don't know. I come too far where I started from. If you have problems, nobody told Nigel road would be easy. Hey, I don't believe. Hey, listen. I don't feel no waste time. I come too far from where I started from. And you know what? Nobody told me the road would be easy. I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. And I'm gonna say it again. I don't feel no waste time. I come too far where I started from. Nobody told me the road would be. Hey, good God, I come too far from to leave me now. And let's say, I've been out here a long time, and God opened the way for me. Nobody told me. Nobody told you. Road would be easy. I don't. Hey, good God Almighty. You know God has been good to you. You know what I like about God? When I went home a few weeks ago, I told my mother, when you get down in the bottomless pit, you feel like you ain't got a friend around. You feel like nobody cares about you. And you know what I like about serving God. You know what I like about serving God. Every time I get down, God sees the stuff. God sees the stuff. That's why I don't mind standing up here telling you I want to say it again.
gonna be all right.